April Melissa Millsap. Can aggression and violent tendencies be inherited from parents? Official scientific consensus says no, although it does recognize the presence of a gene associated with certain behavioral responses. American researchers have found that men carry a unique DNA variant, often called the warrior gene, which in some cases can manifest as what's sometimes referred to as the crime gene. But what influences the extent of this effect? And is it possible for a son to unknowingly inherit a genetic predisposition toward violent behavior from his father? While genes undoubtedly play a significant role, it's crucial not to attribute everything to genetics alone. The shocking assault on young April Millsap, just 14 years old, rattled the small, peaceful town of Armada, Michigan. She had simply gone out to walk her dog as usual, but she never returned home. April Melissa Millsap was born on January 2, 2000, in the small town of St. Joseph, located in Berrien County, Michigan. She was the only child of Jennifer and Stephen Millsap. When April was just 6 years old, her parents divorced, and she continued living with her mother. Soon after, Jennifer began a relationship with a man named David Lichtenfeld. Their romance quickly grew serious, and Jennifer, along with April, moved into David's home in the small rural town of Armada. A year later, Jennifer and David got married. David took on the role of a father figure to April, treating her like his own daughter, and she began calling him Dad. The family appeared happy and well-adjusted. Unfortunately, April remained an only child, as her mother's health issues prevented her from having more children. April grew up to be a lively and outgoing young girl with a broad circle of friends. She excelled academically, actively played sports, and showed a natural gift for art. Despite her many talents, she dreamed of becoming a veterinarian due to her deep love for animals. She had a beloved Labrador retriever named Penny, and taking Penny for walks was a daily ritual. April always informed her parents about where she planned to go, who she would meet, and when she expected to return. She also stayed in constant contact with her family, and Jennifer could always reach her by phone. In middle school, April began dating a boy named Austin Johnson. Before I continue, I want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind later. Now let's move on with the video. Who was a year older than her. The two spent most of their free time together, and their relationship was supported by their parents. However, by the February, their bond seemed to have cooled, and they started seeing less of each other. On Thursday, July 24, 2014, at around 5:30 p.m., April went for her usual walk with Penny. Their outings typically lasted about an hour, and Jennifer expected her daughter to be home by 6:30 p.m. for dinner. It's worth noting that Armada had one of the lowest crime rates in Michigan. With a population of less than 2,000, the town was considered a safe and peaceful place to live. So when April didn't return home at the expected time, Jennifer wasn't immediately alarmed. By 7 p.m., however, Jennifer tried calling her daughter only to discover that her phone was turned off. This was unusual and concerning, but she tried to stay calm and not let her thoughts spiral. With summer break in full swing, Jennifer assumed her daughter might have met up with a friend or possibly Austin. She called Austin, but he said he hadn't seen April that day. They had spoken on the phone earlier in the morning, but that was their only interaction. Growing increasingly worried, Jennifer began calling April's friends, but none of them had any idea where she might be. Tension was mounting when around 8:30 p.m., someone knocked on the door. Jennifer felt a brief wave of relief, thinking her daughter had finally returned home, but it was Austin and his friends standing on the porch. The boys had been passing by and decided to check in to see if April had been found. It turned out they had also been searching for her, calling mutual friends and checking places where she usually walked in the evenings. Austin showed Jennifer a message April had sent him at around 6:20 p.m., but he hadn't noticed it until nearly an hour later. The text read, "I think someone just tried to kidnap me." Initially, Austin thought it was a strange joke, but when Jennifer called him shortly after to report that her daughter was missing, he became alarmed. Along with his friend, he began searching for her, but their efforts that evening turned up nothing. None of April's friends had seen or heard from her. By this time, David had returned home from work. When he learned about his stepdaughter's disappearance, he wasted no time organizing a search. With Jennifer, Austin, and a few of April's friends, they retraced her usual walking route, calling anyone she might have visited and stopping passers-by to ask if they'd seen her. At 9:45 p.m., Jennifer and David went to the local police station to report April as missing. While Jennifer, David, and Austin searched the familiar paths April often took, a married couple jogging in a wooded area about 1.5 miles from the Millsap home stumbled upon something unusual. They were on a trail when they spotted a Labrador with a leash still attached, but no owner in sight. The dog appeared distressed, whining and darting away, before turning back as if trying to lead the couple somewhere. The couple decided to follow the dog. It ran a few yards ahead, pausing to ensure they were keeping up, then led them off the trail and through some bushes. About 30 feet in, they came to a small ravine. Looking down, they saw the lifeless body of a young woman. Her clothing was in disarray, and the scene was deeply unsettling. They immediately contacted law enforcement. At that moment, Jennifer and David were still at the police station, desperately trying to get help to find April. Armada, a quiet town with fewer than 2,000 residents, had a police force of just 2 officers who had never handled anything more serious than minor thefts or vandalism. When news of a violent crime came in, they quickly reached out to neighboring jurisdictions for assistance from more experienced forensic experts. The body discovered in the ravine belonged to a young woman, lying on her back with injuries covering nearly every part of her. Her blouse was torn, her lower clothing and underwear had been completely removed, and her shoes were found several feet away. Evidence initially suggested an attempt at an assault with intent, but this was later ruled out. It was clear, however, that the victim fought back fiercely, and her resistance likely enraged the attacker, leading to her death. Her head, face, and neck had been brutally crushed. On her skin were unusual marks that forensic experts initially struggled to identify. Later, they determined that the marks were from the sole of a large shoe, matching impressions found in the dirt nearby. The assailant had, quite literally, stomped on the victim's body, crushing her throat. Defensive wounds were found on her hands, indicating she fought desperately to survive, but the odds were against her. The medical examiner also identified numerous injuries consistent with being struck by a blunt object, although the specific weapon could not yet be determined. Bruises and abrasions covered her body, evidence that she had been relentlessly beaten, stomped on, and subjected to unimaginable torment. Who could commit such an atrocious act? There was little doubt that the body belonged to April Millsap, the young woman who had gone missing that evening. Witnesses were led to the scene by her dog, Penny, who had stayed near her owner's body. April's parents identified her by her clothing, earrings, and a birthmark on her shoulder. Jennifer, overwhelmed by grief, required immediate medical attention as she nearly suffered a heart attack from the shock. Jennifer, David, and Austin were brought to the police station for questioning as investigators attempted to piece together the timeline of that tragic evening and narrow down possible suspects. April's devastated their daughter had no enemies, and that no one in her life could be capable of such cruelty. Jennifer and David were quickly ruled out as suspects. Both had solid alibis and no conceivable motive. Austin, April's boyfriend, drew greater suspicion due to his uneasy demeanor. The young man admitted that he and April had been dating for about a year, but had grown distant recently, with tension building in their relationship. During summer break, they hadn't been seeing each other as frequently, though they stayed in touch through calls and messages on social media. In reality, the couple was on the verge of breaking up. Austin showed officers the concerning message April had sent him stating that someone had tried to kidnap her. However, he hadn't reacted to it, didn't notify law enforcement, and failed to contact April's parents, which raised suspicions. He claimed he didn't see the message immediately, and upon reading it, assumed it was a joke or an attempt to get his attention. It wasn't until Jennifer called him to report her daughter missing that Austin and his friend decided to join the search. Austin admitted that he and April had argued the day before, though he couldn't clearly explain why. He insisted that April had initiated the conflict and mentioned that her behavior had been unusual recently. This admission only heightened the suspicions of investigators, who decided to detain him to verify his alibi. According to Austin, he had been at home playing video games until about 4 p.m. He then went to a friend's house to help with car repairs. The two worked on the vehicle for about an hour and a half, a timeline corroborated by neighbors who had seen them in the driveway. Afterward, the pair decided to grab a meal at a local cafe. Surveillance footage from the cafe confirmed they were there when Jennifer called Austin to ask about April. It was only after this call that Austin noticed April's earlier message. Despite the unsettling content, he didn't immediately grasp the severity of the situation. When Jennifer called again, more distressed, Austin and his friend began searching the usual paths where April walked her dog. After finding no sign of her, they decided to check at her home. Piecing together the timeline and evidence, investigators concluded that Austin could not have been near the victim at the time of the attack, effectively clearing him as a suspect. Not long after, one of April's close friends brought in for questioning, provided an intriguing lead. She mentioned that April had recently been spending time with a boy named Roger, a known troublemaker at school and an aspiring athlete. According to the friend, Roger had shown a romantic interest in April and had expressed jealousy over her relationships with others. Roger was promptly brought in for questioning, and investigators examined his phone. It revealed frequent, flirtatious exchanges with April, suggesting a budding romantic connection. Given his athletic build and imposing stature, investigators considered him a potential suspect, capable of overpowering April during a jealous outburst. However, it didn't take long to uncover a solid alibi for Roger on the evening of the crime. With no evidence tying him to the scene, authorities had no choice but to release him and rule him out as a suspect. News of the brutal crime involving April spread rapidly throughout the small town, sparking widespread panic and rumors of a predator in the area. People grew afraid to leave their homes and kept their loved ones close, reluctant to let anyone walk alone. The local news covered April's case, urging anyone who had seen or heard something unusual that evening to come forward. Not long after, a young woman called the police with information. She reported seeing suspicious white van driving slowly down her street at around 4:30 p.m. The van caught her attention because it was moving at a slow, walking pace, which felt unusual. As it neared her house, she looked out the window and saw two men inside. The van paused briefly in front of her home. The driver made a gesture and said something, pointing in her direction, while the passenger stared at her closely. Feeling uneasy about the situation, she decided to keep watching until the van drove away. Later, when she learned about the crime that had taken place that evening, she immediately contacted the police. Authorities suspected that the men in the van might have been searching for a victim and had crossed paths with April while she was out walking her dog. Determined to identify the men, investigators worked with the witness to produce a description of the van and composite sketches of the occupants. This information was broadcast on the evening news, with authorities asking the public for help in identifying and locating the suspects. The following day, an unexpected development occurred. The men in the white van voluntarily went to the police station to give their statements. They were identified as repair workers from a nearby town who had been in the area to fix a cable issue. They explained that they had gotten lost while trying to find a house on a parallel street and had stopped in front of the witness's home to check the address. After confirming their story, investigators cleared them of any involvement and released them. 2 days later, another witness came forward with new information. This witness reported seeing a young woman walking her dog on a leash, accompanied by a man pushing a motorcycle beside him. They appeared to be having a casual conversation as they walked. The man noted that nothing about their interaction seemed suspicious. There was no sign that the young woman was upset or being forced. Everything about the scene suggested it was just a normal walk. When a news segment aired detailing the horrific crime involving April, including her photo, a witness realized he might have seen the perpetrator that evening. He provided a detailed description of the man, his clothing, and a distinctive white and blue motorcycle he had never seen in Armada before. When investigators showed the composite sketch to April's parents and friends, none of them recognized the man. They insisted they had never seen him before, and he wasn't part of April's circle. The suspect appeared to be around 35 years old, far too old to have been a friend or acquaintance of April's. Based on the witness's testimony, he had seen the man and April together shortly before she sent the chilling message about a possible abduction attempt. It seemed likely that after being alone with April and ensuring no witnesses were nearby, the attacker made his move. April managed to break free and send her desperate text for help. Thanks to the description of the motorcycle and its distinctive color scheme, the vehicle was located on July 27th outside a local resident's home. The man was immediately detained and taken to the station where the witness was called in for identification. However, the witness stated that this was not the man he had seen with April. The detained man explained that the motorcycle belonged to his friend, a 32-year-old named James Van Callis, who lived in Goodell's, Michigan, about 20 miles from Armada. The next day, July 28, 2014, officers knocked on Van Callis's door to question him about his whereabouts 4 days earlier. Van Callis appeared calm and cooperative, explaining that he had visited a friend in Armada and stayed there for the evening and overnight. His friend corroborated the story, but the account seemed shaky and unconvincing. Detectives requested the clothing and shoes Van Callis had worn during his visit. He handed over a pair of sneakers, jeans, and a t-shirt. Forensic analysis revealed no incriminating evidence on the items, and the sole pattern on the sneakers didn't match the impressions found on April's body or at the crime scene. Despite feeling certain Van Callis was hiding something, investigators had no concrete evidence to detain him further. Investigators decided to take a closer look at James Van Callis Jr.'s background. It was soon revealed that he had a history of minor offenses, including burglary, possession of illegal substances, and failing to pay child support. However, he had no prior record of violent crimes. In contrast, his father, James Van Callis Sr., had a far more serious criminal history. He had served 2 lengthy prison sentences, one for assault and another for an egregious act involving a minor. His most recent conviction, which resulted in a 10-year prison sentence, involved violence of an intimate nature against a young girl. Van Callis Sr. had been released from prison about a year before April's case and was living at the family home with his wife and son. Detectives also began investigating Van Callis Sr., but the witness confidently ruled him out, stating that the man he saw with April was much younger. However, when shown Van Callis Jr., the witness immediately identified him as the man who had been walking with April that evening. A search of the Van Callis home uncovered an illegal operation. James Jr. and his father had been growing band plants in the basement with the intent to sell. Both men were arrested and brought in for questioning. This ensured that the suspect would not flee while investigators worked to build a case against him. All the shoes in the Van Callis home were examined, but none matched the tread pattern found on April's body and at the scene. Investigators concluded that the suspect had likely disposed of the incriminating footwear. Similarly, testing James Jr.'s clothing revealed no evidence. There were no bloodstains or DNA traces from the victim. As for the motorcycle, it had been thoroughly cleaned with harsh chemicals, clearly in an effort to destroy any potential evidence. At this point, a new witness came forward, James Jr.'s girlfriend, Christine. She described him as a cruel and aggressive individual prone to violent outbursts. She revealed that he had physically assaulted her on several occasions and expressed her belief that he was capable of attacking someone like April. According to Christine, James Jr. had a particular interest in much younger girls, mirroring the disturbing tendencies of his father. Christine also mentioned a specific pair of sneakers James Jr. was particularly fond of, black and white Jordan brand shoes. On the evening of July 24th, she returned home to find him frantically trying to clean these sneakers, growing increasingly angry when he couldn't get them spotless. She also noticed him scrubbing his motorcycle and helmet with strong-smelling chemicals. After that evening, she never saw the sneakers again. However, Christine provided investigators with photos of James wearing them from his social media accounts. Using these photos, police identified the model and brand of the shoes, obtained an identical pair, and confirmed that the tread pattern matched the prints left on April's body. Unfortunately, this evidence was considered circumstantial and wouldn't be strong enough to hold up in court. Investigators needed more to solidify their case. James Van Callis's personal computer was seized as part of the investigation, and what law enforcement discovered was both disturbing and incriminating. First, they found an extensive collection of illegal explicit material featuring underage girls stored on his hard drive. Possession of such material is a serious crime in itself, and it was clear that the suspect had been collecting it for years, indicating a troubling fixation on young teens. Second, A recovered browser history revealed that Van Callis frequently searched for content on how to approach and gain the trust of younger girls. He had also been reading articles and watching videos on pickup techniques and ways to charm and manipulate. Third, investigators uncovered evidence of his social media interactions with underage girls. These conversations included compliments and attempts to invite them on dates, further highlighting his unhealthy and unlawful interests. After an extensive search, April's phone was found about half a mile from the crime scene, lying in tall grass by the roadside. It had clearly been discarded by the perpetrator. Although the phone was turned off, it was undamaged, allowing investigators to retrieve its data. One crucial piece of evidence was a fitness app installed on the device. The app tracked April's steps and movement speed, offering insight into her final moments. About 2 minutes before she sent the ominous message to her boyfriend, her pace suddenly increased significantly. This suggested she was trying to flee from someone while typing her plea for help. Immediately after sending the message, April turned and began running in the opposite direction. It appeared she had tried to escape, but was likely blocked by her pursuer. Within a minute, her movement stopped abruptly. This coincided with the location of the ravine where the attack occurred, the same place where April fought desperately for her life. 15 minutes later, the fitness app recorded a sudden burst of speed reaching about 30 miles per hour. The data indicated the device was now moving along the trail consistent with someone riding a motorcycle. Shortly after, the phone came to a stop again and the signal disappeared. It seemed the perpetrator had taken the phone, turned it off, and discarded it in the bushes after driving a short distance. When investigators examined the geolocation data from Van Callis's own phone, it placed him near the crime scene at the exact time of the attack, directly contradicting his alibi of being at a friend's house. This evidence, combined with the findings on his computer, was enough to formally charge Van Callis with the brutal crime and proceed with the case in court. Despite the substantial amount of evidence collected, much of it was circumstantial, which worked in favor of the suspect and his defense. No DNA from James Van Callis was found at the crime scene or on April's body, and none of her DNA was detected on his belongings. In court, Van Callis claimed he had washed his motorcycle and helmet because they were stained with motor oil during repairs. He also stated that his sneakers, the same brand and model linked to the crime, had torn months earlier and he had discarded them. However, the prosecution presented compelling evidence showing that Van Callis had been photographed wearing the same sneakers just a week prior to the crime. Forensic experts also testified that April's injuries were consistent with being struck by a motorcycle helmet, which matched the size and shape of the one belonging to Van Callis. Throughout the investigation and trial, James refused to cooperate with law enforcement and consistently denied any involvement. Although there was no direct evidence tying him to the crime, the circumstantial evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for only a short time before unanimously convicting Van Callis of the brutal attack, including charges of attempted abduction and assault. In February, James Van Callis Jr. was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. All of his appeals were denied. To this day, he continues to assert his innocence and has shown no remorse for the crime. Moving on to the next case. Jennifer Lynn Markham. Jennifer Lynn Markham was born on June 15, 1977, and attended Lanphier High School in Springfield, Illinois. She enjoyed shopping, dancing, and participating in sports. Jennifer worked as a dancer at a strip club in Colorado and also had experience working in the fast food industry. She was last seen on February 17, 2003, at the Denver airport, though it remains uncertain whether she ever boarded a flight. Her 1999 Saturn was later discovered abandoned in a parking lot. Authorities suspect that her disappearance may be connected to her boyfriend, Stephen Ennis, who was incarcerated in a federal detention center at the time. Stephen was awaiting trial on charges related to operating an ecstasy distribution ring, and Jennifer was considered a key witness in the case. Her parents described her as a dedicated mother who would never have willingly left her child behind. Jennifer had brown hair and blue eyes, stood 5 feet 6 inches tall, and weighed approximately 115 pounds. Moving on to the next case. Kelsey Smith. The case of 18-year-old Kelsey Smith is truly baffling. She was taken in broad daylight from a bustling Target parking lot in Kansas, a situation you don't often hear about. but sadly, it does happen. While kidnapping is always terrifying, it's usually easier to understand when it occurs to someone alone in a remote area, especially after dark. But what do you make of this case? After learning about Kelsey Smith's tragic and horrifying experience, one thing becomes clear. Harmful intentions and actions can strike without warning or reason. Whether it's day or night, anyone who crosses paths with danger can become a victim. Kelsey Ann Smith was born on May 3, 1989, in Overland Park, Johnson County, Kansas. Her parents are Greg Allen and Missy Smith. Kelsey was the third of 4 children in her family. From a young age, she was cheerful and full of life. And when I say bright, I truly mean it. She had a warm and friendly personality that made her a joy to be around. She deeply loved her family and friends and wasn't one to shy away from challenges. Whenever someone doubted her abilities, her go-to response was, "Want a bet?" People who knew Kelsey also said she was fair and caring. She never accepted anything for herself unless her brothers received the same. This showed just how much she valued teamwork and fairness. Shawnee Mission West High School was where Kelsey went to school and finished on May 24, 2007. From the start, she was a girl who spoke a lot. She loved being on stage, playing different instruments, and nearly everything else. Kelsey worked hard in her school's dance band and played the clarinet. She did everything from track and field to theater, art, choir, and a writer's class. She worked part-time at AMC Movie Theater at the time of the case. Kelsey was going to Kansas State University in the fall to study veterinary science after high school. Well, Kelsey did want to work in medicine in some way. When she was younger, she wanted to be a doctor, but she changed her mind, and now she wants to be a veterinarian. Around the same time as the case, Kelsey was seeing a boy named John Beersmith. He loved Kelsey more than anything else in the world. The things that John liked most about Kelsey were that she was smart, friendly, and lived life to the fullest. Also, John wasn't a stranger in the Smith home. Sometimes, John's girlfriend's family would ask him to their house for dinner and games. John and Kelsey's dad, Greg, got along great too. They mostly became friends over sports. Everyone in Kelsey's family thought John was the best guy for her. Kelsey liked to celebrate even the smallest events, so even though they were just starting out, they were already getting along great. Their relationship had been going strong for 6 months before June 2, 2007, when Kelsey chose to buy John a small gift at her local Target. But for Kelsey's family, this was the day that everything changed because she never came home. The June 2, 2007 began like any other day. Misty, Kelsey's mom, had to go to a friend's wedding during the day while Kelsey had to work at the AMC Theater. Kelsey, her dad, Greg, and her sister, Lindsay, went to the nearby amusement park after Kelsey got off work. Later that night, around 6 p.m., Kelsey wanted to quickly go to Target to buy her boyfriend John a gift to mark 6 months of being together. The first thing Kelsey did was ask her sister to come with her, but her sister was busy and couldn't. So Kelsey took her sister's 1987 Buick Regal and drove to Target. This was something Kelsey did all the time. Kelsey already knew the way to the nearby Target, so she wasn't going anywhere uncharted or dangerous. Plus, it was still light outside, so there was no reason to be scared, right? Kelsey went on her trip. She parked her car and went inside the store. CCTV video showed her getting what she needed as she walked around. Kelsey had on shorts and a light pink tank top. Phone records also showed that Kelsey called her mom. They talked for a while, and then her mom said she would be home soon and hung up. After a few minutes, though, Kelsey missed a call from John, her boyfriend, which was strange. Kelsey always picked up the phone, and she had just talked to her mom, so she hadn't left her phone at home. John became very worried about this, so he went to Kelsey's house and found her not there. Kelsey wasn't home when everyone thought she would be after a long time. Right away, a scared Greg called Kelsey several times, but she wouldn't answer. Now this was really scary. Anyone who knew Kelsey knew that she would always answer the phone when her parents called. She had just talked to her mom, so it was very strange that she stopped talking to anyone all of a sudden. Kelsey's parents called her friends to see if she was with any of them, but she wasn't. The Smith family was really scared by Kelsey's silence. After some time, Greg and one of Kelsey's sisters drove around the neighborhood and even looked in the parking lots of several stores to see if Kelsey's car was there. Sure enough, they found Kelsey's car. But oddly enough, it wasn't at Target, which is where she was last seen. It was in a dark Macy's parking lot at Oak Park Mall, and no one was there. This is when Kelsey's family realized something was wrong, and they called the police right away. When the police got to the spot where Kelsey's car was found, they looked inside. They found her purse, wallet, other belongings, and the things she bought at Target. Kelsey was the only thing that wasn't there, her phone. The car wasn't broken. The cops didn't see any trash or anything else that seemed odd, but the cops saw something pink sticking out of the trunk when they looked at the car from the back. When the police opened the trunk, however, they found nothing inside. The police also looked at the car's forensics and found a single handprint on the driver's side seatbelt. Kelsey didn't own it, though. The car had been driven by someone who wasn't Kelsey or anyone in the family. The cops had a hard time with this. The only thing left to do was look at the surveillance tape, which started the official search for the missing person. After going to Target like she always did, Kelsey was nowhere to be found, and her car and things were discovered abandoned in a different shop. What had happened, though? The best way for the cops to find out what happened was to go to Target and look at the CCTV footage for anything suspicious. That's what they did. Target officials gave the police CCTV video, which they then looked through. They saw Kelsey walk into the store, look around, get her things at the checkout counter, and leave the store. It didn't look like anything was wrong. Kelsey didn't meet or talk to anyone. She wasn't scared or tense. The cops were very confused and angry because everything looked like it was fine. But when the police looked at the parking lot's CCTV video, they saw Kelsey driving the wrong way to her house after she loaded the stuff into the car. Why would she do that? Well, Greg and Missy looked for their daughter on their own while the police looked at the video surveillance. They made posters of people who were lost and put them up everywhere they could. They only wanted their daughter to come home. And as the minutes went by, they became more and more scared. A big search was done for Kelsey. Some of her friends, Smith family neighbors, and other people offered to help look in the area. Everyone in the town worked together to find Kelsey, who is 18 years old, because they were afraid for her. In order to get some answers and clear up their doubts, the cops even questioned Kelsey's family and her boyfriend, John. But everything changed when they looked at CCTV video from a Macy's store where Kelsey's car had been left behind. Investigators slowed down the video and could still make out a person walking out of Kelsey's car after turning it off, even though the quality of the video was terrible. It wasn't Kelsey, which was strange. A light or white shirt and dark shorts seemed to be on the figure. It looked like a person. Who was he, though? And why did he have Kelsey's car? Finally, the officers went back to the Target CCTV footage and searched for the same man that they had seen before. Well, this time, the video that seemed normal turned creepy when this new information came out. It turned out that Kelsey had parked her car next to a big truck and then gone into Target. Just seconds later, a man in dark shorts and a white shirt came up behind her. It turned out that the man who was following her owned the truck she had parked next to. People watched the man stay away from Kelsey as she looked around the store and got what she needed. As soon as Kelsey was seen leaving Target, the strange man followed her. One odd detail about the video was that Kelsey never appeared frightened or glanced back, clearly unaware that someone was following her. The idea that she had no clue about the man trailing her is truly unsettling. This prompted the police to carefully review the Target parking lot footage frame by frame as Kelsey loaded items into her car. While playing at normal speed, it seemed like she was simply getting into her vehicle, but the slow-motion review revealed something, or someone, running up from the left and grabbing her. At first, it looked like Kelsey was just bending down to get into her car, but it soon became clear that she had been seriously injured and had fallen. Because of this, the police were confident she had been abducted. The person in the footage was wearing a white shirt and dark shorts, the same outfit seen in another video from Macy's, where Kelsey's abandoned car was later discovered. Investigators were now certain foul play was involved, but Kelsey remained missing. The pressing question was, who was this man? The only real way to locate Kelsey and her abductor was through her phone. However, Verizon, Kelsey's cell phone provider, unnecessarily delayed this crucial part of the investigation. Right after Kelsey went missing, her parents asked Verizon Wireless to track her phone. Since Kelsey's dad, Greg, was a police officer, he understood that the phone's location would be the best lead to find her. Despite this, Verizon refused to provide any information about the phone's last known location until 4 days later, by which time the FBI was already involved. Verizon claimed that Kelsey's family didn't use the correct technical terms when requesting the phone's location, which seems hard to believe. What other way could they have asked besides plainly saying, "Tell me where this phone is"? Regardless, the information finally came through after a frustrating 4-day wait. The phone's last ping was recorded by a tower roughly 18 to 20 miles from where Kelsey was abducted. To make things even more complicated, the spot was in a different state. The area was shrunk down to Grandview, Missouri's Longview Lake. To be clear, Kelsey was taken in Kansas, but the last time her phone was used was in Missouri. After putting together a search party, the cops and FBI went to an area with a lot of trees on June 6th and looked there. It didn't take days or hours. It only took 45 minutes. Around 1:30 p.m., they found something, but it wasn't what they were hoping for. Kelsey Smith's body, aged 18, was found, which is very sad. Kelsey's naked body was covered in twigs and leaves, and she had been killed with a belt. Investigators had to tell Kelsey's parents that they had found her body, which was a very hard thing to do. To say that their lives were changed forever would be an understatement. People who knew Kelsey and her family and friends couldn't believe what they were hearing. What she did was something she had done a million times before, but now she was gone. Can you picture how horrified, guilty, and sad Kelsey's sister must have been? She had things to do, so she didn't go with Kelsey. It must be very hard for Kelsey's sister to deal with all the what-ifs going through her mind. This wasn't her fault at all, but it's easy to see why she feels guilty. But the police had to find the person who killed Kelsey even though they had found her body. To do this, they looked at CCTV images from Target and Macy's. See, Kelsey's car was left behind at Macy's around 9:17 p.m. on June 2nd. When police looked at video footage from Target around the same time, they saw something or someone. It was seen that a man in light clothes got into a 1970s Chevrolet pickup truck and drove off. Although it was dark, the cops couldn't make out much of the car. However, it looked a lot like the truck that was parked next to Kelsey's car in the earlier video. When the police looked at both videos from 6 p.m. and 9:22 p.m., they saw that the pickup truck was in both of them, but that still wasn't enough for the cops to figure out who owned the truck. At this point, the police released the video of the man and the truck to the public and asked people in the area for any tips or information about this person. Soon, there were a lot of calls, and one of them led to a big step forward in the case. As soon as very clear pictures of the man and the truck went public, a woman called in. The man looked a lot like her neighbor who had the same pickup truck, she said. Jack Hall, who was 26 years old, was that man. He was married and had a boy who was 4 years old. The cops were sure they had the right person. Edwin was arrested in the evening of June 6th, just as his family was going for a vacation. When the police arrived at Edwin's house, his car was full of bags. Luckily, the police didn't give him much room to move. He was caught right away and charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping with a dangerous intent. His family couldn't say a word. The vacation that was meant to be fun for the whole family turned into something completely different. Edwin did not have any adult convictions when the police looked into his criminal past, but he did have some convictions when he was younger. In foster care, Edwin was found a family. But when he was adopted, he tried to use a bread knife to hurt his new sister. Even though he was only 15, he was old enough to know that what was happening was wrong. After a while, Edwin was charged with assault for hitting a kid in the head with a baseball bat. Without a doubt, Edwin had angry and mean habits that went back a long time. When the police asked Edwin about what he knew, he pretended not to know, just like every other criminal. But when his fingerprints were compared to the ones on Kelsey's seatbelt, they were a perfect match. Edwin's fingerprint was found in Kelsey's car, and he was seen following her around Target. Why wouldn't he know anything about her? Thus, the police were aware that Edwin was not telling the truth. In the end, the police questioned him and put a $5 million bond on him. Investigators also told him that he could be put to death for the charges he was facing just to make him uncomfortable and hopefully get some more information from him. He finally gave up the lie and admitted to the crime to escape the death penalty. Edwin said that he fell in love with Kelsey as soon as she pulled into the Target parking lot a minute after him around 6 p.m., even though he was already married and a father. But when has that ever stopped someone? For some reason, he chose to follow Kelsey around the shop to see if she was meeting anyone else. Actually, Edwin did say that he liked Kelsey's legs, which is really gross. What he did next, though, was truly horrible. He went outside to wait for Kelsey to be fully open and vulnerable. When he thought it was time, he walked up to her with a gun and pushed her into her own car, which can be seen on video. In the car with Kelsey, Edwin quickly took over as the driver and drove away from the parking lot. He drove 20 miles from Target and met Kelsey in the woods of Missouri. He and then killed her right there so she wouldn't get him in trouble. After the cruel act, Edwin drove back, left Kelsey's car at Macy's, walked to his pickup truck, which was still parked at Target, and drove off like nothing had happened. It was clear to the cops that this evil man should be put on trial for what he did to Kelsey, but there was something wrong. There was a lot of disagreement about where the hearing should take place because Edwin did the crime in Missouri, and Kelsey was taken from Kansas in the first place. It's always been something like this that makes no sense to me. There must be at least one police officer watching this video. Please explain to me why it matters where the trial takes place in situations involving more than one county. That person is a killer because you know what he did and who he killed. Then why not just flip a coin and pick a country? We all know what happened, so why drag it out for days or weeks? In any case, the government made Edwin a deal to plead guilty. Rather than being put to death, he could plead guilty to all of the charges against him. Without a doubt, Edwin agreed right away. There were a lot of Kelsey's family and friends in the courtroom. They just wanted this monster to pay for what he did. He was given a life term without the chance of parole on September 16, 2007, almost 2 months after pleading guilty. After getting his sentence, Edwin cried and said sorry to Kelsey's family as if that would change anything or bring her back. Kelsey's parents were so upset and emotional during the victim impact comments. Even though they were glad Kelsey finally got what she earned, it wasn't enough to make up for what had been taken from them. If Kelsey's parents felt sorry for anything, it was Edwin's son who was a good kid who had no idea what bad things his evil father could do. He had grown up without parents, and now he had to raise his own kid without a father. Even though the person responsible for Kelsey's violent, sudden, and meaningless death was in jail, Greg and Missy found a lot of mistakes and loose ends during their investigation. This was especially true when they were trying to figure out where Kelsey had been before she disappeared. Because of privacy rules, Verizon had to wait 4 days before telling everyone where Kelsey was. It was this information that helped police find her. The police were able to do that in just 45 minutes. Really, Verizon should have paid attention to the Smith family's request from the start. This case would have been solved a lot faster. I will say that there may be parts of the release of this information that I don't understand. But in my view, there's no reason to keep this information from the public for 4 days during an investigation into a murder. In Kelsey's case, it's not like knowing this sooner would have saved her life. She was already dead when she was reported missing. On the other hand, this much time could mean the difference between life and death in another case. During the time that Kelsey went missing, phone companies would only share information like location, text messages, and calls if the user asked them to or if a court ordered them to. And if you know anything about crimes and warrants, you know that they take time. This is very helpful in situations where people have gone missing. The Kelsey Smith Act was made because of this. This law said that cell phone companies have to give information like the location of a phone straight to the police if someone is in danger. This way, the police can quickly find the person and hopefully find them unharmed. In February 2009, the act became law in Kansas, but sadly, the law didn't make it past the U.S. House of Representatives in February 2016. I don't understand how this act was thrown out. Again, I'm sure there are privacy issues with this kind of thing that I don't understand, but I find it crazy that an act that could save so many lives could be thrown out so quickly. That's all I have to say about it. I think it would be an invasion of privacy for people who leave on their own. They've been trying to get the Kelsey Smith Act made into a federal law since February 2009, and they're still going after it. They don't want anyone else to go through what Kelsey did. Greg and Missy also started the Kelsey Smith Foundation to keep Kelsey living in the hearts of others. The foundation helps kids and teens understand the bad things going on around them. Self-defense training, seminars, and public awareness efforts are all things that the foundation offers to people who want to protect themselves. Greg taught his children this lesson during his time as a police officer. This case was truly shocking. It's frightening to realize that danger can lurk even in the middle of a busy, well-populated area. Kelsey believed she was safe because she saw no obvious threat nearby. It's heartbreaking to imagine how terrified Kelsey must have felt when a dangerous and threatening stranger forced her into her car. This highlights how crucial it is to always stay alert to your surroundings, even in places you think are secure. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it usually is, no matter what others might say. Most of the time, your gut feeling is right and can protect you from harm or worse. Moving on to the next case. Morgan Harrington. One of the most unforgettable experiences is witnessing your favorite artist or band perform live. Think about it. Maybe you grew up listening to a certain singer or band on the radio, but seeing them in person and feeling a connection to their music is an entirely different experience. Morgan Harrington, who was 20 years old, likely felt this excitement deeply. She was eagerly anticipating October 17, 2009. For Morgan, it was a dream come true to see Metallica perform live at the John Paul Jones Arena at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. Sadly, she never made it to the concert she had been eagerly awaiting for months, and she vanished that very day. Born on July 24, 1989, in Charlottesville, Virginia, Morgan Harrington was the daughter of Dan and Gil Harrington. At the time, she was an ordinary young woman. She also had a brother named Alex. Morgan's family said she preferred staying home rather than going out frequently. Even though she had a tight-knit group of friends, she didn't enjoy partying or being out late often. If given the choice, she would much rather be at home. Her mother described her with 4 simple yet powerful words: shining, loving, beautiful, and unique. Morgan was passionate about making a positive difference in the world, particularly by advocating for children's rights. She chose her college major thoughtfully, knowing that her ultimate goal was to work with and support children, something she truly loved. After finishing high school early, Morgan enrolled at Virginia Tech University in Blacksburg, Virginia. Despite being away at college, she maintained a close relationship with her parents and made sure to visit them whenever she had free time. Morgan was on the cusp of realizing her dreams and was filled with excitement about what the future held. Morgan was great for Virginia Tech because she would be able to work toward a good cause by teaching young people. Morgan liked to listen to music and go to live shows when she wasn't studying. Her favorite band was Metallica. You could see Metallica pictures all over Morgan's room if you went there. Now, to be honest, Morgan is the last person I'd think would like Metallica, but hey, good for her. That band is great. Morgan was known as the world's best hugger by her family and friends. Morgan was definitely touchy-feely, but not everyone is. She didn't like to just shake hands or nod. She wanted more. It was easy for Morgan to get along with her parents and brother. One thing Morgan's family doesn't wish they had done differently after she died is that they never took a moment for granted. Her family was always there for her and made sure to say, "I love you," before leaving. For them, time with Morgan was very valuable, and they made the most of every moment. In fact, there was a very special way that the family said, "I love you." Morgan and her mom would sign 2-4-1 to each other every day as they left the yard. Her mom says that this means "I love you too much" forever and again. It's the little things like this that tend to stay with you forever. In this case, Gil remembers these small acts because 2-4-1 was the last thing Morgan signed for her mother before she left and was never seen again. That day, October 17, 2009, was months in the making for Morgan. Metal Gear Solid was having a big show at the John Paul Jones Arena at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville that day. Now Metallica was to Morgan what Taylor Swift is to Swifties. She was jumping off the walls and struggling to keep her excitement in check. Even more, Morgan had put the concert tickets on her fridge months ahead of time. She couldn't wait to finally see her favorite band live. Seeing those tickets made Morgan smile every time she walked by her kitchen because they reminded her of things. The concert day finally came. Morgan and 3 close friends drove to the arena and sat down to wait for the show to begin. Morgan went to find a bathroom during the opening act show. Her search took her outside the arena. This was strange because the arena had 18 bathrooms for women. It's not clear why Morgan left the arena. She may have just walked by the bathrooms without seeing them and ended up outside the venue by accident. But the truth is, we don't know. Morgan went back to the building, but she wasn't let in. You see, the venue had a policy that said you couldn't go back in. And even though Morgan had the ticket, she couldn't get security to let her in. Morgan chose to leave the arena and find a way to get back home, because she was upset that she couldn't see her favorite band perform live. Meanwhile, Morgan's friends called her around 8:48 p.m. when they saw that she hadn't come back. That's when they learned that she had been locked out. Morgan told her friends not to worry because she was going home. Morgan was in Charlottesville, so she wasn't lost or didn't know how to get back home. To make the trip easier, she didn't have a car or cash. Plus, all of her things except her phone and bag were with her friends inside the arena. Too bad this was the last time Morgan would ever talk to anyone. She was gone after this call with friends. Morgan had planned to see her folks the next day, October 18th. Morgan needed her dad's help with some math problems, and she was also planning to see her parents for a weekly get-together. So this trip was a win-win for her. However, Morgan did not answer when her folks called or texted her to ask when she would be there. No one was picking up the phone or reading her texts. Morgan's friends who were at the arena with her last night were shocked when Gil and Dan called them to say that Morgan had been split up. Morgan's folks were afraid that their child might be in trouble. She didn't have any cash or a car with her. Was she somewhere risky? Was something wrong with her? The parents of Morgan were having a hard time because they had a lot of questions. The cops were called right away, and Morgan, who is 20 years old, was reported missing. The police looked all over the area where Morgan had been seen last. At around 9:30 p.m., some people said they saw Morgan walking on a nearby bridge. A different group of people saw Morgan with 3 guys soon after she left the arena. A person walking by also saw a discarded shirt with red spots next to the arena where Morgan was last seen. That's right, this was not good news. The police were able to find this shirt and present it as proof. The cops were shocked by everything. Could it be that these 3 guys are to blame for Morgan's radio silence and lack of presence? Did Morgan own the shirt? Last but not least, what was going on? So while the officers were trying to put everything together, something new was found. At UVA's Lanigan Athletic Field, someone saw something in the RV lot. The purse had been thrown away. It had ID and a phone that didn't have batteries in it. The cops were called right away, and they were able to connect the items to Morgan Harrington, who is 20 years old. When this discovery was shared with Dan and Gil, it broke their hearts. Morgan was meant to stay at their house for a few days, but she was nowhere to be found. Some very bad thoughts were going through their minds, and it was getting harder and harder to get out of these dark thoughts as the days went by. No matter how much I want to say that the investigation moved faster after Morgan's bag was found, the truth is that it didn't. There were not any hints. Even though the police were trying very hard to find Morgan, time was just flying by. 3 months had gone by in an instant, and Morgan still hadn't been seen. No one was holding out hope that she would be found living and undamaged. That thought quickly turned into a scary reality when on January 26, 2010, a farmer found something very scary. On the 742-acre Anchorage farm, which is about 10 miles from John Paul Jones Arena, the bodies of people were found. After the cops were called, the bodies were taken in to be identified and DNA taken. The skeletons were in terrible shape because it had been months. Unfortunately, they were found to be 20-year-old Morgan Harrington. No official information from the police was released about Morgan's death, but her mom, Gil, confirmed that she had been brutally attacked and unfortunately used. It's so sad to think that a fun night out could go so badly wrong so quickly. By April 2010, forensic tests had been done on the red shirt with the tears that was found in 2009 near where Morgan was last seen. From the way the shirt looked, it was sad that Morgan owned it, and the attack on Morgan must have been very horrible and upsetting. The police didn't know what to do. They were sure that the person who killed Morgan knew the area well. See, the place where Morgan's body was found was pretty much in the middle of nowhere. No one ever came here, but someone from outside the area wouldn't have known that. Someone from Charlottesville had to have done it because they knew this was the best place to hide a body. DNA evidence gave the cops a kind of lead, which was good news. See, DNA proof connected Morgan's crime to another case of kidnapping and assault in Fairfax in February 2005. A woman who asked to remain nameless and goes by the name RG was raped on September 24, 2005, as she was walking home from the store around 8:30 p.m. RG passed out because the attack was so intense. There was no doubt that the man was going to kill RG. The attacker luckily ran away when he saw headlights from a car far away. The man in the car took RG to the hospital where a DNA test was done. At that time, the test did not match any suspects in the database. RG was so devastated by what happened that she had to go back to her hometown to spend some time healing mentally, emotionally, and physically, if that's even possible. So the police were sure that the man who did it was the same one. With the DNA, a hybrid sketch was made, and the public was asked for any information they could find on this strange and clearly violent man. As police looked into the murder and tried to find the killer, Crime Stoppers offered a $100,000 prize for information about the killer and where he was. Because of this, Metallica also stepped up and raised the prize to $150,000. They also used a video message to ask everyone to help. The police and the local community did everything possible to find the person responsible for attacking RG and brutally murdering Morgan. Sadly, the situation only worsened over time. 5 years had passed, yet the killer remained at large. Even more alarming, he was about to strike again. It was September 2014, nearly 5 years after Morgan disappeared and tragically lost her life. By then, detectives felt powerless. Morgan's death had been a horrific tragedy, and RG was left deeply traumatized and shattered. Now, the same killer had returned, targeting yet another student. This new victim was an 18-year-old British student named Hannah Graham, attending the University of Virginia. Hannah went missing on September 14, 2014. That morning, she was seen at Charlottesville's downtown mall. Later that evening, she attended several parties with friends. After leaving the second party, Hannah, who was very intoxicated, sent a text to her friend just after 1 a.m. saying she was lost and trying to find her way home. Those words were tragically the last she ever communicated. Right now, I just want to say this. I'm deeply frustrated by how many cases I encounter where someone leaves a party or bar alone at night. The solution is simple. Don't let your friends wander off alone and risk getting lost or hurt. It doesn't matter if you have to take their keys or physically hold them back. Never let your friends get lost when they're drunk or even when they're not drunk. People could easily escape this kind of trouble if they would just watch out for each other. In any case, Hannah didn't show up to meet her friends the next day, which made them very worried. Hannah Graham, 18, was reported missing on September 15, 2014 after her parents were contacted. When the police looked at the CCTV video again, they were able to find Hannah's last traces and figure out where she was before she vanished. Hannah was seen walking alone in several places after midnight, including by a club, across a gas station, and finally, at 1:06 a.m. at a pizza place. However, this is where the detectives saw something very strange. Someone was following Hannah. Anyone could see that the man was following Hannah everywhere she went, even though he was close behind her. The strange man was first seen on the other side of the street across from the mall. But as soon as he saw Hannah, he ran straight for her. Several people who saw the man told the police that he had a very strange aura around him. He didn't look nice at all. He went up to Hannah at one point and led her to a bar where they spent some time together. The man was so rude to Hannah by offering her more drinks when it was clear she didn't need any. Another witness saw Hannah and the same man standing next to an orange 1998 Chrysler Sebring. He could clearly hear Hannah yelling, "I'm not getting in that car with you." The police thought that this strange man might hold the key to solving not only Hannah's case, but also Morgan's, and maybe even RG's. It was too easy to see the connections. The guys who did these crimes were after college students, especially young women. They went missing in the same area, so the search for this man began. However, Hannah's family would also experience a terrible disaster 5 weeks later when her body was found. This happened while the police were still looking for the murderer. Searches from the Chesterfield County Sheriff's Office found dead bodies at an abandoned home on October 18, 2014. The bodies were definitely identified as those of Hannah Graham, who was 18 years old. The police initially did not share the official cause of death. However, on November 18, 2014, Hannah's cause of death was simply listed as undetermined. But the proof investigators were able to find made it look a lot like Morgan Harrington's death. Even though Hannah's death was very sad, it helped the police find the person who was planning this huge terror attack. The cops were finally able to figure out who the man was in the CCTV footage who was seen following Hannah. This was Jesse Leroy Matthew Jr., who is 32 years old. In Charlottesville, Virginia, he worked as a nurse's aide and a cab driver. Jesse had a very hard childhood. Poor Jesse was a child, which is terrible. But Jesse didn't learn how to heal from this trauma. Instead, He hid his emotional scars deep, and over time, he became violent, dark, and angry at women. He first went to the conservative Christian Liberty University in Lynchburg as an adult, and then he went to the Christopher Newport University in Newport News. This change happened because he was suspected of attacking women violently at both universities. This is what led him to quit the CNU football team in September 2003. That was in February 2006. Jesse got his DMV pass and worked as a taxi driver in the Charlottesville area. A fight between Jesse and RG is thought to have happened when he was leaving college and getting his driver's license. After that, when Morgan went missing in October 2009, police thought she had met Jesse and that he took advantage of her because she was poor and couldn't defend herself. He pretended to give her a ride home. Moving forward to September 2014, the police thought the same thing happened with Hannah. However, it seems more likely that he forced her into his car because she was heard refusing to get in with him. Because of all of this, the police were able to get a request to search the man's house and car. It was possible for the cops to find Hannah's print on the car's passenger door. Meanwhile, the detectives found a phone with the SIM card still in it and shorts with DNA from both Jesse and Hannah on them in the flat. Officially, Jesse was named a suspect in Hannah's missing by police on September 24, 2014. The police also found out where Jesse was when Hannah went missing. Footage from CCTV showed him going from bar to bar, getting drunk, and acting very rudely and angrily toward women. In the end, Jesse went to the police station and asked the cops to let him talk to a lawyer about Hannah's case. He was charged with speeding as he was leaving, though, which is how they got a warrant for his arrest in the first place. Jesse had other ideas, though. His bank account was empty almost right away after what happened, and he was on the run. Investigators were able to find him 2 days later on September 24, 2014, sleeping on Gilchrist Beach in Galveston, Texas. He was caught right then and there. It was finally time for everything to fit together. The DNA from Morgan's body matched the DNA found on RG and Hannah's shorts that were found in Jesse's apartment. Every match put Jesse in charge of every crime. The bad things that Jesse had done were finally going to catch up with him. Jesse was officially charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping in the death of Morgan Harrington on September 15, 2015. The hearing was set for October 24, 2017. Jesse pleaded guilty to all charges on March 2016 before this could happen. This included the murder charge against Hannah and the attack and attempted murder charge against RG in February 2005. As part of a deal, Jesse pleaded guilty. After pleading guilty to all charges, Jesse would not be able to appeal the decision. This means that the death sentence would not be an option. The judge finally gave Jesse Matthew 4 life sentences without the chance of release in the cases of Morgan and Hannah. For his attack on RG and attempt to kill him, Jesse got 3 more life terms. Jesse would spend his whole life in jail and would never show his face again. In May 2019, several news sites said that Jesse Matthew had been diagnosed with colon cancer in the 4th stage. After telling the families of the victims, Jesse was moved from Red Onion State Prison to Sussex State Prison for treatment. He is still living right now. I know that no one should ever wish something like this on anyone, but I guess for a crazy man like Jesse who thinks it's okay to scare women, an exception can be made. This guy doesn't make me feel bad. While Morgan's mom, Gil, was hearing about Jesse's illness, she showed a lot more compassion. Whatever justice is, she went on, maybe this is the next step in his justice. If so, this might be his karma. It's scary to think that Jesse Matthew abused and attacked women for 10 years, and these are just the acts we know about. I think Jesse has something to do with a number of missing people and cold cases in Virginia, but we will never know for sure because there is no DNA evidence or other solid proof. Something scares me more than that. Being aware of how many people Jesse has attacked or the fact that this evil killer must have hurt a lot of people and not punished them. The Harrington and Graham families went through terrible things that brought their loved ones closer together. During the search for Jesse, they were there for each other. Really strangely comfortable to know that there are people next to you who have been through the same pain and are there to help you get through it. When a monster with an unfathomable grudge against women set his sights on Morgan and Hannah, they had no way to defend themselves. Sadly, these 2 helpless women were carried straight to their deaths. Even though Hannah's death was sad, it was this that made Jesse lose his cool and get arrested. Following this terrible event, Gil and Dan Harrington set up a group called Help Save the Next Girl. It is an honorary nonprofit group that was created to remember Morgan and all that she was. It also helps people who want to protect themselves from evil, build healthy relationships between people, and reach out to families of victims who are going through similar tragedies. The Morgan Dana Harrington Memorial Scholarship at the Virginia Tech Carilion School of Medicine is one of several scholarships established to support students with strong academic records and a passion for higher education. Morgan's legacy of advocating for children in need continues through Orphan Medical Network International, OMNI, an organization in Africa dedicated to providing medical care to children and others in need. Similarly, the Hannah E. Graham Memorial Scholarship was created in 2021 to honor her dedication and love for softball leagues in Northern Virginia. No one can truly grasp how Morgan and Hannah's families have managed to carry on after such devastating losses. While these young women are no longer suffering, their families will bear the weight of this pain for the rest of their lives. It's deeply unsettling to know that the man responsible can live his life behind bars, while the families continue to grapple with their grief every day. It's a harsh reality that's far from easy for them to accept. Moving on to the next case. April Annette DuBois. April Annette DuBois, a 21-year-old resident of Greenville County, South Carolina, was married to David Randall DuBois. Their marriage was troubled, leading to a legal separation. On February 11th, Greenville County Police were called to April's apartment on Hudson Road after she had not been seen for over a week. Upon entering, officers discovered her body inside. Investigators determined that April had died under suspicious circumstances approximately 9 days earlier. They suspected David was responsible for her death, leading to his arrest in 2006. However, due to a lack of sufficient evidence, he was ultimately released. April's close friend, Brandy Jones, described her as lively and full of energy, saying, "On the outside, she was sassy, spunky, and the life of the party, always smiling. But when she was alone, she was scared. She was broken." On March 18, 2021, 55-year-old David DuBois was arrested once again in connection with the case. Lieutenant Ron Flood explained that over the past year, the sheriff's office's new cold case unit had reopened the investigation. Through their efforts, they uncovered new evidence that established probable cause, leading to the determination that David DuBois was responsible for the death of his then legally separated wife. He is currently being held at the Greenville County Detention Center without bond. Sheriff Hobart Lewis issued a statement regarding the arrest, saying, "While I cannot begin to comprehend the hardship that families endure when they tragically lose a loved one and the case remains unsolved, I can assure you that our office is committed to revisiting each and every one of these cold cases in hopes of delivering justice. I am incredibly proud of the dedication our investigators have shown in pursuing these cases, and I hope we can provide even a small sense of closure to those affected by these tragedies." At this time, authorities have not disclosed the specific details of the new evidence that led to David's arrest. Moving on to the next case. Nona Dirksmeyer. The police are trained professionals who understand the challenges and dangers they face. Everyone agrees that officers are taught to remain calm and composed during critical situations. Their role is to prevent crime, gather evidence, apprehend offenders, and provide justice and closure for victims' families. But what happens when the very police force you trust makes a single bad decision that turns everything upside down? It took far too long for authorities to solve the case of 19-year-old beauty Queen Nona Dirksmeyer, who was found dead in her own home. The investigation was marked by carelessness and incompetence, as the police wasted valuable time chasing a suspect they believed was guilty while overlooking obvious clues that were present all along. Nona Carol Dirksmeyer was born on December 26, 1985, in Zachary, Louisiana, to Paul and Carol Dirksmeyer. Later, the family relocated to Russellville, Arkansas, where they settled. Her father served in the Army, and her mother worked as a nurse. She had 4 boys and 1 sister, and they were all very close. After that, Nona went to Dover High School and finished in February 2004. But on August 20th, 1996, when Nona was only 10, tragedy and sadness came into the lives of her family. Today was the day that Nona's dad, Paul, died. It was a very sad time for her family. However, Nona was in high school soon after he died, and she told her mom a very scary secret she had been keeping to herself for years. You see, Nona was able to leave when her father died. Why? Because it turned out that the person Nona thought would guard her was actually a monster. The sad truth is that Nona's father hurt in every way. Hearing a story like that is truly horrifying, and it's understandable to feel disgusted. Thankfully, Nona managed to break free from that cycle at a young age, but that doesn't erase the lasting impact. She not only had to carry the heavy burden of trauma and guilt, but also faced the challenge of growing up without a stable father figure. When she finally opened up to her mother, Carol was fortunately supportive and believed her. However, Carol was powerless to take action because the abuser, her husband, had already passed away and could no longer be held accountable for his crimes in this life. Nona also bore deep psychological scars from the abuse. She was a kind and quiet girl, but depression had shadowed her from a very young age. She didn't have many friends, and those who met her never fully understood the pain she carried inside. But the people who knew Nona really cared about her. Kevin Jones, her best friend since kindergarten, was one of them. Kevin was the kind of best friend that everyone wants. He was kind and loving, and he looked out for Nona too. They grew up together because they lived close to each other and couldn't be separated. They always planned events and did things together because they liked being with each other. One of the few people who knew about Nona's abuse was Kevin. He didn't leave her to deal with it on her own, though. He stayed with her through it all. Kevin had a lot of patience and thought Nona would get through it, even though she was tough at times. He was there for her when she was depressed, and their friendship grew stronger over time. In fact, they became so close that they started dating, which was wonderful. Anyone who saw Nona and Kevin together knew they were meant to be together. Other people who knew Nona told her to come out of her shell too. There's nothing wrong with being private, but Nona's friends knew she was meant to do great things and just needed a little push. Finally, this little push got Nona to compete in beauty pageants. Several neighborhood beauty contests she competed in and won many prizes. Her first competition was for Miss Patagene Valley in February 2005. That same year, she also went to the Miss Arkansas pageant. Nona also used her mental pain to do good things. She did a lot of volunteer work for women who had been or violently assaulted. That being said, she was very religious. She sang in the choir at her church and was a member of the First Christian Church and the Big Brothers and Big Sisters organization. In terms of college, both Nona and Kevin went to Arkansas Tech University. Nona chose to major in music education because she wanted to use her musical skills as a possible job path. Nona's time to fly was now college, so she chose to rent an apartment close to school. Okay, so Nona's mom, Carol, got married again after Paul died, and Nona's stepdad was much better than her biological father. But he was still strict, and everyone in the house had to follow his rules, like getting home early and having a curfew, etc. Nona didn't want to do that because she was in college and wanted to be on her own, which was a good reason. This is why she moved into her Russellville, Arkansas apartment. But not long after that, Kevin told Nona some shocking news. Kevin had chosen to switch schools, which meant he would be moving an hour and a half away from Nona. The two people had been together for 5 years, but this was their first time trying to be together long distance. Because Kevin and Nona loved each other so much, even though they lived far apart, they made it work. They talked to each other often, told each other what was going on, and met up whenever they had time. Soon, it was December 2005, and the air was filled with happy holiday energy. The sad thing is that something very scary happened to Nona at this very moment in the very place she called home. Kevin and Nona were going to meet on December 15th, 2005. They were excited to spend time together now that the holidays were over. In the morning of the same day, around 9 a.m., Nona texted Kevin to wish him a good day, and that was the saddest thing Kevin ever heard from Nona. Kevin kept waiting for Nona to call, but he never did. As he became more worried, he kept calling and texting Nona. At one point, Kevin texted Nona, "Are you still alive?" Out of panic, Kevin called his delivery friend, Ryan, right away when he was done with his chores and asked if he could go check on Nona. Ryan was shocked to see Nona's car parked outside her apartment building when he got there. The lights in the house were still on from the outside, but no one answered the doorbell when he rang it. Kevin felt really bad about this, so he asked his mom to go with him to Nona's place. Sometimes Kevin has the key to her place, but he forgot to bring it with him that time. They had no choice but to use the back folding doors to get in. To give you some background, the folding doors were usually locked from the inside. Some sources say it was some kind of protection fence. Nona asked for this because she was afraid for her safety when she was home alone. Kevin thought the security bars would be on the back folding doors, but there were none when the three of them got there. Kevin was scared right away because Nona would never have taken down the fence, especially if she was home by herself. So why was it taken down? Kevin saw something red on the blinds as soon as he walked into the flat. It's likely not a surprise what it was. He went up to Nona's bedroom, though, and saw a terrible scene. A dead and cold 19-year-old woman named Nona was lying on the floor. It was a horrible scene. On a whim, Kevin, who was very upset, grabbed Nona, who had already died, and started crying violently. It had been 5 years since they broke up, and now she was lying there, dead and out in the open for who knows how long. Janice, Kevin's mom, called the cops right away. The house was taped off as soon as investigators and emergency services got there. At first look, the police could tell that the attack on Nona was very bad. Nona was hurt very badly with a table lamp and a knife. A used birth control package wrapper was on the floor, and there was one fingerprint on the lamp. Based on the analysis, Nona could have died at any time between 10:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. But this is where the detectives really went wrong. They didn't look closely at the crime scene, look at the blinds for clues, or look for shoe prints in the flat. In addition, they only looked in the bedroom where Nona was found and never went anywhere else. But why? That's because they were already looking at one person, Kevin. When the police came into the room and saw Kevin, they knew they had the right person. First, they saw that Kevin's clothes were stained with Nona's blood. This was because, as you may remember, he cried and hugged her when he found her, and the police decided that he did it on purpose to hide any clues about the crime that might be on his clothes. For them, this was the only answer that made sense, but this was only the beginning. The cops also thought it was odd that Kevin went to Nona's apartment with his mom and a friend. The cops say that Kevin planned ahead and brought people with him so that they could testify against him. Don't forget the text message Kevin sent to Nona asking if she was still living. That's right. The police held on to this information like their jobs depended on it and said Kevin killed Nona. You're not the only one who thinks this is completely crazy. There's more, though. Kevin, who was 19 years old, was taken to the police station and questioned for a long time. He was even forced to admit to the crime. Kevin was in the room by himself during the questioning. When he realized he was a suspect in the death of his girlfriend, he punched the chair out of fear and anger, and the video caught it. So when the police saw this, they immediately thought Kevin was a secret. This behavior made him more likely to attack Nona and kill her. Remember that Kevin didn't have a lawyer and was being pushed to admit. Kevin had to take a polygraph test at one point, and guess what? He failed. But here's the catch. The person who looked at the test data wasn't even a specialist. Since he was a new police officer, these results didn't help him at all. If that didn't make you want to pull out your hair, this next part will. The police had no proof that Kevin was guilty. The crime scene showed that Nona had fought for her life, which means that the person who attacked her probably had cuts, bruises, and other injuries on their body as well. Kevin didn't have any, though. At one point, the police even thought Kevin was known as jealous and angry boyfriend who wanted to get back at her. Now this part might not make sense to you. Again, though, you're not the only one who feels this way. What happened was that the police talked to Nona's friends and found out that she had been seeing someone else while Kevin wasn't around. The police found the man's story credible and didn't initially suspect him. However, their focus quickly shifted to Kevin. According to the police, Kevin confronted Nona and killed her with a baseball bat after discovering she was cheating on him. With this theory in hand, the police felt pressured to get a confession from Kevin. But how exactly did they manage that? They told Kevin that everyone in both his family and Nona's family believed he was guilty. It was obvious the officers were trying to pin the crime on Kevin just to close the case quickly. Being held at the station for extended periods left Kevin frustrated and upset. He even missed Nona's funeral, which he had helped organize. This ordeal dragged on for months. And if you think that sounds extreme, the story was far from over. Kevin was ultimately arrested and charged with murder in March 2006, nearly 3 months after Nona's death. Their only proof, Kevin's fingerprint, was found on the light bulb in the lamp. Detectives thought that this one fingerprint on the murder weapon was enough to prove that he did it. Truth be told, Kevin did touch the lamp while he had Nona in his arms, which could explain the print on the light bulb. But was that enough for the police to find him guilty of murder? That would be found out soon enough. Everyone knew about the investigation, and they were afraid that the jurors would make the wrong decision based on rumors. That's why the trial took place somewhere else. It was said by the defense that Kevin killed Nona because his phone was off from 10:30 a.m. to 1 p.m., and his fingerprint was found on the murder weapon, but only one fingerprint. On the other hand, the defense brought in people who supported Kevin's alibi. They saw Kevin at a gas station and gave him money to buy food. His grandma was one of them. Someone else saw Kevin eat lunch between 12:30 and 1 p.m. This was also proven by CCTV film. That means Kevin couldn't have done the crime in that short of a time. At that moment, he wasn't near Nona's house. The defense also brought up the mistakes that were made in the probe. The defense says that the cops did look at the unknown fingerprints, but the database did not show any matches. Those could have been the fingerprints of the real criminal. Also, the police didn't find any DNA on the birth control package at first. But when the lawyers asked for a second test, they found bits of unknown male DNA that didn't belong to Kevin. An autopsy tech also told an interesting fact about Nona's body position. He said that the body was on its back at first, but after a while, it was turned over so that it was facing downwards. This made it look like someone used Nona after she had died. It may seem impossible, but Kevin's hearing went on for more than a year. After deliberating, the jury came to the conclusion that Kevin was not guilty because there was not enough proof to prove his guilt. Kevin was relieved, but what really hurt him was that a lot of people, including the cops, still thought he was guilty. Think about how Kevin must have felt. Not only did he find his 5-year girlfriend dead, but the cops were making him look like the killer, and some people believed them. The cops made a lot of mistakes and weren't very professional or skilled. They were so close to convicting someone who wasn't guilty of killing Nona. When Kevin was no longer a suspect, the agents went back to their desks. This time, lawyers were there to tell them what to do. The DNA on the birth control box was compared to the DNA of all the guys who knew and talked to Nona, but the results were not clear. That is until September 2007, when the case finally got better. A man named Gary Dunn was caught stealing. What did that have to do with the attack by Nona? The DNA that was found at Nona's crime scene was the same as Gary's. On top of that, Gary lived in the same apartment building as Nona, and at first, Nona even thought Gary might be involved in her research. But because the police were looking in the wrong way, he was ruled out. Even worse, Gary was also charged with and found guilty of assaulting another woman. It was also never checked that he had a good excuse for the attack on Nona. Gary says that he was just shopping with his mom. Remember this because it will be important again. During this case, the detectives keep making big mistakes. It was time for them to make things right. The cops finally got it, and Gary was brought in to be questioned. He did pass a polygraph test, though. One more thing, though. This test was once again given by someone who wasn't authorized to read polygraph results. That's not true. When the police finally examined Gary's story, they discovered it didn't hold up. Gary had indeed gone shopping with his mother, but that was 2 days before Nona was attacked. He had shown the shopping receipts to the police back in February 2005, when he was first questioned as a suspect, but either the detectives overlooked the dates or simply didn't care. This case could have been solved years earlier if the police had given proper attention to Gary's alibi, instead of pressuring Kevin so much that he ended up confessing to a crime he didn't commit. Adding to the confusion, the unknown fingerprints found on the lamp resembled Gary's, but the match wasn't perfect. Because so much time had passed since the murder, crucial evidence had been lost. The fingerprints and DNA weren't collected within the first few hours after the crime was reported. This meant that, despite the police's mistakes, the DNA and fingerprint evidence clearly pointing to Gary couldn't be used in court, which severely hindered the investigation. Now, armed with this new information, Gary was finally arrested and charged with Nona's murder. He was on parole for almost killing a woman in February 2002. Gary was a very mean person. He was known for being rough with women in the past. He hurt a woman who was out for a run in February 2002. It was so bad that he told her he would kill her if she fought back. The woman was lucky to get away. She ran to her car and called the cops. Soon after, Gary was caught and sentenced to 19 months in jail. At Gary's murder trial, which began in April 2010, his wife spoke out against him. She said that he was a scary and angry man, and that she was just someone he could hit. The husband of Gary also told a very scary but damning story. See, she caught him watching Nona through her window a few weeks before her sad death. The prosecutor was shocked by this because it smelled like it was planned ahead of time. Gary didn't just attack Nona for no reason, even though we don't know why. Gary had picked Nona on purpose to be his next target of abuse and violence, and she died because of that choice. In other words, this is what the prosecutor said happened on December 15th. Gary knocked on Nona's door because they lived in the same building. For some reason, Nona let him in. He was either acting like he needed help or there was another reason. And no matter what, he quickly beat Nona up in her bedroom where he did many horrible things, including using the lamp to kill her. The most bizarre thing about this whole situation is that Gary's defense team kept blaming Kevin and sticking to the story that Kevin caught Gary's woman cheating on him. The trial was called a mistrial because Gary's fingerprints and DNA could not be used as proof. The judges also couldn't decide what to do. There was only one meaning here. A new trial was set up, and this time, the woman Gary Struzak in February 2002 was one of the witnesses. Although this did not help, the judges still could not decide, and they had to try again. It is totally upsetting to learn that the investigators had the proof but couldn't use it because it had been damaged. I can't think of anything worse that would feel like for Nona's family. Gary Dunn, who clearly attacked Nona and then killed her, was let go without being charged. It's all because the detectives didn't do their job at the start of the case. Gary, who was 39 at the time, was caught again soon after for 2 more crimes in one day in February 2018. The first one was an attempt to take a woman, which luckily failed, and the second one was acting badly in public in front of another woman. The police were called right away, and because Gary had a history of violence, he was eventually found guilty and given a 15-year prison term. This case was really sad. The person who killed Nona not only got away with it once, but several times. Gary is in jail, but he's not there because he killed Nona. Even though the cops know exactly who did it, Nona's case is still officially open and closed. Nona was only 19 years old, but she had a lot of goals for the future. She planned to become a music teacher and had a whole life ahead of her. After all the bad things that happened and the pain she was in, Nona didn't deserve to have her life ended so violently and for no reason. Families and friends of the kind and beautiful young woman miss her every day. We can only hope that detectives find enough proof to finally find Gary guilty of killing Nona so that the Dirksmeyer family can move on with their lives. On that terrible day, Kevin lost not only his girlfriend, but also his whole future. It was even worse when he found out that his girlfriend of 5 years had been cheating on him behind his back. After everything that happened, Kevin decided to take a different path and pursued a career in law, eventually becoming a lawyer. In February 2011, he sued 2 police officers who had wrongly accused him, but the lawsuit didn't lead to any results. The true cause of Nona's death remains a mystery, and Kevin lost the life he once envisioned. But for what? Sadly, that question will likely never be answered. Kevin has dedicated his life to studying and practicing law, vowing to prevent such a grave injustice from happening to anyone else. Unfortunately, this offers little comfort to Nona, her family, and everyone who cared about her. The damage has already been done. Moving on to the next case. Pradyuman Thakur. 7-year-old Pradyuman Thakur lived in Gurugram, India, with his parents, Varun Chandra Thakur and Jyoti Thakur, and his 11-year-old sister, Vidhi. Pradyuman was known as a cheerful and playful child. At the time, he was in the 2nd grade at Ryan International School in Gurugram. On the morning of September 8, 2017, the day began like any other. Pradyuman and Vidhi woke up around 6:30 a.m. to get ready for school. After having breakfast, their father, Varun, drove them to school at 7:40 a.m. Though the siblings had previously used the school bus, concerns over safety led Varun to start driving them personally. He dropped them off at the school gate at approximately 7:55 a.m. and returned home. Just 10 minutes later, around 8:05 a.m., as teachers were settling into classrooms and students were taking their seats, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Staff rushed to investigate and were met with a horrifying scene. Just outside the school's washroom, they discovered Pradyuman lying in a pool of blood. The school staff quickly called out to Ashok Kumar, the school bus conductor, who was at a nearby water cooler washing up. They asked him to help carry Pradyuman to a car owned by one of the teachers. Ashok immediately rushed over, picked up the injured boy, and placed him in the vehicle. Pradyuman was then taken to a nearby hospital in Badshahpur. Meanwhile, Varun Thakur had just returned home after dropping his children off at school. At around 8:10 a.m., his wife received a phone call. As she was occupied with household chores, Varun answered it. On the line was the school's receptionist, who asked him to contact the junior school supervisor right away. Varun attempted to call her twice, but the line didn't connect. On the third attempt, he got through, and the supervisor informed him that his son had been found bleeding outside the school washroom. Varun was asked to reach Badshahpur Hospital. At that moment, Varun believed that his child might have had a fall and gotten hurt, and he wasn't worried. As Pradyuman's parents were on their way, they received another call informing them that Pradyuman had been moved to a much bigger Artemis hospital. Worried that the injuries might be more severe than he had initially thought, Varun hurried to the Artemis hospital. Upon arriving at the hospital, Varun, expecting to comfort his injured son, was taken to the emergency room where Pradyuman was lying in the hospital bed, his shirt unbuttoned and bandages barely concealing a deep wound on his neck. He was told by the doctor that Pradyuman had succumbed to his injuries. It was evident to him from the injuries that this was not an incident as a result of an accident or a fight. Rather, it appeared to be a deliberate, cold, and calculated murder. News of the murder spread fast, and the media reached the Ryan International School. The school's administration and the authorities responsible for the student safety found themselves under media spotlight, subject to intense scrutiny. Even though a murder had happened in the school premises, school neglected to call the police. It was Pradyuman's parents who eventually notified the police. Police started their investigation around 11:30 a.m. Unfortunately, the crime scene was not properly secured, leading to journalists, staff, and the parents inadvertently destroying the evidence. Blood samples and fingerprints were collected by the forensic team from the crime scene. Outside the washroom, there were bloody handprints and blood splatters on the walls, suggesting that Pradyuman had crawled out, potentially hitting the wall in his attempt to escape. Inside one of the washroom stalls, police recovered the knife that was used to kill Pradyuman. Police checked the CCTV footage from the hallway near the scene of the crime. Even though the CCTV did not have a clear view of the washroom, the police determined Pradyuman entered the washroom, and a few minutes later, they saw him crawl out of the bathroom, collapsing in the hallway. By noon, hundreds of angry parents had gathered inside the school, shouting slogans, creaking glass windows and tables. As a result, the school was finally shut off to the public. By 3 p.m. that day, an autopsy was conducted. According to the autopsy, there were 2 cuts on Pradyuman's neck. One was superficial and the other was fatal. Pradyuman had sustained an 18 centimeters long wound which ran from the middle of his neck all the way to the back of his ear. The attacker had slashed the veins near the victim's throat and esophagus. As a result, Pradyuman would have been unable to scream or call for help. The wound was 2 centimeters deep. The coroner stated that the murderer was stouter and bigger than Pradyuman. That day, hundreds of people, including Pradyuman's parents, marched into the police station demanding the person responsible to be put behind bars. Under mounting public pressure, the police apprehended 10 individuals who had used the restroom around the time of Pradyuman's death. While questioning them, they observed that one of the individuals had blood stains on their clothes. Based solely on this observation and in a hastily conducted investigation, the Gurugram police announced to the media within 9 hours of the murder that the school bus conductor Ashok Kumar was the perpetrator. It's worth noting that Ashok Kumar had carried Pradyuman to the car, explaining the presence of the blood on his shirt. Despite this, he became their prime suspect. As per the police theory, Ashok arrived at the school in the morning bus around 7:50 a.m. after the children had disembarked from his bus. He had intended to use the toolkit knife present in the bus for his personal needs that day, but upon taking it out of the box, he discovered that it was rusted. Consequently, he entered the school premises in search of a washroom to clean the knife. According to the police theory, when Pradyuman entered the washroom, they say Ashok Kumar tried to sexually assault him, but when he started to scream for help, Ashok panicked and pulled out the knife and stabbed him in the throat. He then leaves the knife at the scene of the crime and walks out of the washroom and washes his clothes at the nearby water cooler. This is when he was called to assist in carrying Pradyuman to the car. To support this theory, They claimed that the gardener who was among the initial individuals to discover Pradyuman had told them that he saw Ashok washing his blood-stained clothes and slippers at the water cooler. A teacher along with 2 more students claimed to have seen Ashok near the washroom. The next day, the Gurugram police paraded Ashok Kumar in front of the media. Ashok even confessed to murdering Pradyuman in front of the media. Ashok Kumar's arrest sparked widespread skepticism and concern, including from Pradyuman's own family. A few days after the incident, his mother publicly expressed her belief that Ashok was not responsible for the murder and was being falsely accused. The police's narrative was called into question, particularly since the autopsy report found no evidence of sexual assault, contradicting their claims. Further doubts arose when the bus driver, with whom Ashok worked, revealed to the media that he had been coerced by Gurugram police into stating that the murder weapon came from the bus toolkit. Disillusioned by what he saw as a flawed investigation, Pradyuman's father took the matter to the Supreme Court, requesting the case be handed over to the Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI. On September 15, 2017, the state's chief minister officially announced that the case would be transferred to the CBI, India's premier investigative agency. The CBI began its probe from scratch, deploying a forensic team to independently examine the school premises and crime scene. They meticulously re-evaluated all evidence and forensic material, ultimately finding no link between Ashok Kumar and the murder. Their analysis confirmed that the fingerprints at the crime scene did not match Ashok's, casting serious doubt on the initial investigation by the Gurugram police. Following this, on 22 November 2017, Ashok was granted bail by the district court in Gurugram. On 28 February 2018, Ashok was acquitted of all charges relating to the murder of Pradyuman Thakur. Ashok stated that his confession had been coerced. During questioning, Ashok told the CBI that the theory was concocted by the Gurugram police, and he was made to rehearse it several times before he could say it in a proper sequence. He alleged that he was beaten up mercilessly, was not given food, and was not allowed to sleep until he confessed. It was also found that a gardener actually stated that he had not seen any bloodstains on Ashok's clothing before he assisted them in picking up Pradyuman to take him to the hospital. He also stated that he had also been repeatedly assaulted by the police in an effort to coerce him into confessing to the murder. The teacher too confirmed that Ashok stained his shirt while lifting Pradyuman to take him to the car. The witnesses told the CBI that their statements were tweaked to suit the line of investigation by the Gurugram police, just as Ashok was compelled to confess to a murder. The CBI then closely observed the CCTV footage, inspected the crime scene, and monitored the movements of everyone near the washroom. In the CCTV footage, they did see Ashok Kumar entering the washroom. However, he left before Pradyuman got there. The CBI started investigating all the students who had initially seen Pradyuman in the hallway. With the help of the school staff, all the students were identified and the CBI questioned them. One of the students, however, stood out. In the CCTV footage, the CBI accessed a 7-second clip showing Pradyuman with his student, something the Gurugram police had ignored. When the CBI enhanced the photo, they noticed that the student was carrying something in his shirt. They believe it was the knife used to kill Pradyuman. He was seen entering and exiting the washroom around the time of the murder. On July 2017, the CBI arrested the unnamed Class 11 student who was aged 16 at the time for Pradyuman Thakur's murder. The student was one of the first students present at the crime scene and had informed the school authorities that Pradyuman had been injured. This student had been questioned by the CBI before his arrest. They had also pulled up his phone records and found that the student had searched about types of poison before the murder and ways to remove fingerprints after the murder. The CBI also found that the student had purchased a knife a few days before the murder from a local market. It was found that the student was not doing well academically. 2 other students had alleged that prior to the murder, the student had brought poison to the school and tried to trick some students into drinking it by mixing it in their water bottle in an attempt to postpone the half-a-day exam and parent-teacher meeting. Fortunately, the students detected something unusual and refused to drink it. It was reported that the incident was brought to the notice of the class teacher, but it was not taken seriously. One of the students said that around 3 weeks before the attack, the student had told them that they did not have to worry about the upcoming exams and parent-teacher meeting. When asked why, he reportedly said that it would not happen. During his interrogation, the student had confessed to murdering Pradyuman in the presence of his father, independent witnesses, and a juvenile welfare official. A CBI officer said the student had devised a plan to kill someone so that the exams and the PTM would be canceled. He said, quote, "The student lured Pradyuman inside on the pretext of discussing something important and within seconds slit his throat. Somebody was going to die that day. He came prepared that he was going to use the knife he was carrying on someone. Pradyuman just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time." After murdering Pradyuman, the student informed the school staff about the injured boy. As teachers and staff started to gather near the washroom, he slipped away and sat in his classroom. He was late by a few minutes for the exam and did not write anything in the exam. Soltz said the student was quite popular in the school as he used to play the piano, but he didn't know Pradyuman. He was known to often skip classes and was found in the music room. His interest was in music, not so much in his studies. On 11th November 2017, since the student was a juvenile at the time of the murder, the student was placed in a juvenile home for observation to determine if he will be tried as an adult or a juvenile. After conducting evaluations on the student's mental and physical state, the Juvenile Justice Board declared on 20th December 2017 that he would be treated as an adult and undergo a regular trial in court. The trial for Pradyuman's murder has yet to begin. In October 2022, the Supreme Court granted interim bail to the accused. Earlier, in January 2021, the CBI formally charged several Gurugram police officers with allegedly framing Ashok Kumar. The charges included fabricating evidence, using torture, and engaging in a criminal conspiracy. Despite these serious accusations, the officers have yet to be arrested. Meanwhile, Pradyuman's parents continue their relentless pursuit of justice for their son's tragic death. The National Human Rights Commission directed the Gurugram police to compensate Ashok for his wrongful imprisonment, but he rejected the compensation, calling the amount insufficient. Since his release from jail, Ashok has struggled to reclaim a normal life. He lost his job, was forced out of his home, and, along with his wife, has faced severe hardship in caring for their children. They've encountered roadblocks in school admissions and have even been denied medical services. More than 5 years have passed, but the trauma and disruption to their lives remain deeply felt. Moving on to the next case. The McCullough family. The relationship between parents and their adult children is shaped by a variety of influences, often beginning in early childhood. One of the most influential elements is the style of parenting, whether it's grounded in empathy, mutual respect, and support, or rooted in rigid control and strict discipline. On the surface, the McCulloughs appeared to be a typical middle-class family, well-educated, financially secure, and committed to traditional conservative values. The parents raised 5 children under a firm set of principles they believed would instill strong morals and guide them toward success. However, it seems the children experienced their upbringing quite differently. As they matured, each of them eventually left home and limited contact with their parents to occasional text messages. Unbeknownst to them, both parents had died, and this had been the case for 4 years. The shocking truth only emerged after their family physician raised concerns. It was a haunting reflection of a deeply disconnected family. The McCulloughs resided in a large, 3-story home situated in a quiet, upper-middle-class neighborhood in the small town of Great Bateau, Essex, England. John McCullough, the family patriarch, was a highly regarded professor at a prestigious university and had published multiple academic papers on autism spectrum disorders. His wife, Lois, dedicated her life to maintaining a structured household and raising their children. In October 1988, the couple welcomed their youngest child, a daughter named Virginia. By then, both parents were already in their 40s and were already raising 4 children, 2 daughters and 2 sons. Virginia's birth came as a surprise, but the deeply religious McCulloughs viewed her arrival as a divine gift. The children were raised in a highly disciplined environment governed by firm rules and routines. The household functioned on a strict schedule, with each child responsible for designated chores. Acts of defiance were often met with corporal punishment. In one particularly serious incident, Lois struck her younger son with a belt so severely that his bruises were noticed at school, leading to an investigation by child welfare authorities. Despite living together for many years, Lois and John reportedly never displayed much affection for each other. They slept in separate bedrooms, spoke to one another in a reserved manner, and refrained from showing any signs of tenderness. Displays of affection, such as hugs or kisses, were entirely absent from their household. This strict and emotionally distant dynamic extended to their children. The McCulloughs rarely expressed warmth or praised their kids, believing this might spoil them. Instead, punishments for minor infractions were common. The children were expected to excel academically and contribute to the household, but they were not allowed to visit friends or invite anyone into their home. Discipline was enforced with an iron hand, and breaking the rules was simply not an option. Lois McCullough struggled with obsessive-compulsive disorder from a young age, which was compounded by mysophobia, a fear of germs and dirt. This manifested in her obsessive cleaning habits and constant disinfecting of the house. Keeping pets was strictly forbidden, and each of her children was expected to maintain their rooms to her exacting standards. Lois would conduct surprise inspections, and any signs of dust or untidiness would result in severe consequences. Over time, Lois's mental health deteriorated further. While she had always been reserved and rarely interacted with neighbors, she began avoiding people entirely. She left the house only when absolutely necessary, and even then, hurried back as quickly as possible. In her later years, she avoided eye contact, walking with her head down to prevent interactions. Alongside her existing anxieties, she developed agoraphobia, leaving her practically housebound. John McCullough, her husband, suffered from diabetes, which eventually led to a rapid decline in his eyesight. By the time he was in his 70s, he had retired from his teaching career and lived on a modest pension. Like Lois, John rarely left the house. On the rare occasions he ventured out for errands, he didn't greet others, not out of arrogance, but simply because his poor vision made it difficult to recognize faces unless someone directly addressed him. As soon as the older children reached adulthood, they left the McCullough household, scattering to different parts of the country. They built their own lives and families, maintaining only sporadic contact with their parents through phone calls, or more often, text messages. The McCullough family's emotional distance became evident in this pattern. They had no tradition of gathering for holidays, nor did they celebrate special occasions at home. To the grown children, it was enough to know their parents were alive and being cared for by their youngest sibling, who still lived in the family home. Virginia, the youngest of the McCullough children, stood apart from her siblings. Unlike them, she did not rush to leave home after high school. From an early age, Virginia was regarded as an odd and reclusive child. While her siblings had limited social lives due to their parents' strict rules, such as banning guests and outings, Virginia took her isolation further. She struggled to connect even with her brothers and sisters. Instead, she often talked to herself and concocted elaborate stories, passing them off as true events. As a result, she was labeled a compulsive liar. Her parents, however, seemed unconcerned about her lack of social connections. They believed Virginia had been sent by a higher power to care for them in their old age. The fact that she had no personal life, had never dated, and actively avoided people was seen as entirely natural. To Lois and John, Virginia's role as their caregiver was simply her destiny. It is unclear whether Virginia received any formal education after high school, but it's likely she did, as her parents considered it an essential part of life. However, building a career proved impossible for her, as she couldn't stay at any job for long due to her eccentric behavior and tendency to lie. For a while, Virginia worked as a bartender at a local pub and also had a job at the post office. But for the most part, she spent her time at home, helping her parents with household chores. Sometimes her parents would inquire why she wasn't working, but Virginia always had a plausible excuse. Either she was unfairly fired, still looking for a job, or waiting for an invitation from a large company that had already reviewed her resume. As her parents grew older, however, they became less and less concerned about their daughter's situation. By the time John reached his 70s, his eyesight had deteriorated significantly, with almost no vision in one eye and blurred sight in the other, so he rarely left the house. Lois's phobias also worsened over the years, and she only left the house for medical appointments with their family therapist, who monitored their health and adjusted their treatments. The couple hardly interacted with their neighbors. It seemed they were content with this life, especially knowing Virginia would always be there to care for them. Virginia spent a lot of her time on the computer, mostly playing games. She told her parents that she was actively looking for work, sending out her resume to different companies. But as time passed, Virginia never managed to secure a job. She came up with a simple yet effective scheme to continue living off her parents without facing their disapproval. By making them pity her instead. Virginia knew how seriously her parents took their health. They regularly went for medical checkups and took their prescribed medications without fail. So Virginia started complaining about her own health, inventing serious conditions that she didn't actually have. To make her complaints more believable, she visited doctors, describing symptoms she found online. She was sent for various tests and blood work, but of course, none of her diagnoses were ever confirmed. She told her parents she had been diagnosed with diabetes, which she claimed she inherited from her father, as well as heart problems. Then she mentioned a tumor and the need for urgent surgery. Concerned for her health, John and Lois gave her money for treatment. In February 2017, Virginia suddenly announced that she was pregnant, but never revealed the name of the father. John and Lois, though shocked by the news, were ready to accept an illegitimate grandchild. After all, their daughter was almost 30, completely alone, and they thought she would have someone to live for after their passing. This time, Virginia's lie went too far. She even bought a fake belly online to pretend she was pregnant. But after a few months, she claimed she wasn't feeling well and needed to go to the hospital. When she returned, she said she had lost the unborn child. Her parents mourned the loss, never suspecting that their daughter had simply deceived them. At one point, Virginia suggested to her parents that they let her take full control over their finances and accounts. The elderly couple agreed, as they had little understanding of modern technology and rarely left the house. This newfound control over the family's bank accounts and cards gave Virginia unrestricted financial freedom, which she quickly used to fuel her growing obsession with impulsive shopping. With no one to stop her, she began ordering countless items online, most of which were completely unnecessary. In fact, the majority of her purchases were never even opened. Instead, she hid the unopened boxes in closets, under her bed, or piled them in the storage room. There was, however, one notable exception. Virginia gave her mother a kitchen appliance that was surprisingly well received. Her mother expressed genuine gratitude and even offered praise, a rare occurrence in their household. Then, in early 2018, Virginia became convinced she had artistic talent. She converted her bedroom into a makeshift art studio, complete with canvases, paints, and easels. She told her parents that art critics had admired her work and claimed her paintings were soon to be featured in a contemporary gallery. Virginia went so far as to declare that she was destined for fame and financial success through her art. Around the mid-2000s teens, Virginia began visiting online casino sites regularly, placing bets and constantly losing money. Over time, her gambling addiction deepened, and after gaining access to her parents' savings, she started increasing her bets until she had gambled away all their money. Naturally, John and Lois had no idea that they were essentially bankrupt. They couldn't check their account status since they didn't have access to the online banking portal. And by that point, Virginia had started taking out loans in their names, continuing her spending spree on useless items and gambling away their savings. But things couldn't go on like this forever. No one was paying off the loans. The debt kept growing, interest piled up, and Virginia just kept taking out new loans. One day, the bank called their home phone, and John answered. The bank informed him of the substantial debts and outstanding loans. John felt faint upon hearing the news and nearly suffered a heart attack. He immediately told his wife, and together they went to confront Virginia, demanding an explanation. Virginia, however, was quick to play the part of the surprised daughter. She assured them that she would look into it right away. Then she sat down at her computer, clicked away for a few minutes, and claimed that her account had been hacked by criminals who had stolen all their money and taken out loans. Virginia reassured her parents that she would sort everything out and they would get their stolen money back. Over the next few months, she put on a show of activity, telling her parents that she had filed a police report and that the criminals were being pursued and would be forced to return everything. Eventually, she told them that everything had been resolved, the money had been returned to their account, and there were no more loans. For a while, John and Lois calmed down, but about 6 months later, they were once again contacted about the growing debts. This time, Virginia convinced her parents that there had been some sort of mistake in the bank system, and the wrong information had been passed along. She was very convincing, and the elderly couple believed their daughter once again. However, Virginia knew that this couldn't continue forever. She had been taking out loans and knew that the bank wouldn't just let them slide. Her parents would keep receiving calls, and soon they would have more questions. Eventually, they would stop believing her lies. Or even worse, after another round of deceit, they might contact the authorities to figure out who was mismanaging their finances. The horrific plan. Virginia thought long and hard about how to keep living in her parents' house, spending their money, and taking out loans in their name without anyone being able to hold her accountable. Shockingly, her older siblings remained unaware of what was really going on. They didn't call their parents often, and even less frequently visited them. Meanwhile, John and Lois never complained or shared their concerns with their children. By March 2019, the situation had escalated to a breaking point. Virginia understood that she was walking on thin ice, and she had to act quickly. Unfortunately, her solution was as shocking as it was chilling. She decided to eliminate her elderly parents. But it had to be done in a way that no one would suspect anything, and everyone would still believe that John and Lois were alive and well in their large home. Luckily, they had always kept to themselves, so the neighbors likely wouldn't notice anything unusual for a while. Since Lois and John had numerous chronic health issues, they were always taking different medications, and Virginia was the one responsible for keeping track of them. Her father was almost blind, and her mother trusted her completely with managing their medications, as there had never been any problems in the past. Now, Virginia decided to experiment with the dosage of sedatives, blood pressure medications, and the psychiatric drugs her mother took for her mental health issues. For several months, Virginia secretly poisoned her own parents, carefully observing how they reacted to different medications. Unfortunately, the elderly couple, trusting their daughter and believing it was just a normal seasonal health issue, didn't go to the doctor about their deteriorating condition. They chalked it up to the usual symptoms they had experienced many times before, convinced it would soon pass. In early June 2019, Virginia had gathered enough powerful prescription medications that would have been more than enough to end the lives of both of her parents. However, she decided to be cautious and bought a sharp kitchen knife, just in case the drugs didn't work as planned. On June 17, 2019, Virginia finally made the decision that this would be the last day of her father and mother's lives. She behaved as usual, without raising any suspicion. She cooked dinner, went to the store, and helped her mother with some household chores. In the evening, she sat with her parents while they watched TV, and later prepared them both a deadly cocktail that would ensure they wouldn't wake up the next morning. Her father occasionally enjoyed a small amount of strong alcohol from his collection of expensive bottles stored in his office. This collection had taken him years to build, and in retirement, he savored the opportunity to try different drinks. It was in the bottle of aged whiskey that Virginia mixed a lethal dose of heart medication. Unfortunately, the alcohol masked the bitter taste of the pills. Her mother, however, didn't drink alcohol at all. For Lois, Virginia made a herbal tea and insisted that the strange bitter taste came from medicinal herbs, which supposedly had no side effects. But Lois refused to drink the rest of the tea. John finished his drink, and Virginia helped him to his bedroom, wishing him good night. She left her mother's tea on the bedside table, still hoping that Lois would drink it. Before going to her own room, Virginia took one last glance at her mother through the partially open door, then went to bed. That night, Virginia slept soundly without any guilt or second thoughts. The next morning, she didn't rush to get out of bed, staying under the covers until almost 11 o'clock, an indulgence in their house. She decided that if no one had come by to check on her by that time and scold her for being lazy, there would be no one to do so. First, she went into her father's room. He was lying in bed, seemingly peacefully asleep. Virginia touched his hand, but it was cold and stiff, meaning he had passed away shortly after going to sleep. His body couldn't withstand the effects of the medications mixed with alcohol, and his heart gave out. Afterward, Virginia made her way to her mother's bedroom, only to find that Lois hadn't finished her drink. Still alive, Lois was unable to get out of bed, heavily sedated and in a state of confusion, unsure of her surroundings. When she asked Virginia what time it was, her daughter calmly replied that it was still early and encouraged her to go back to sleep. Virginia then switched on her mother's favorite radio station and quietly exited the room. She headed to the utility closet, where she retrieved a sharp knife and a hammer, items she had bought in advance. Although her plan wasn't fully formed, she knew these tools would allow her to complete what she had begun. Returning to her mother's room, Virginia found Lois smiling and lost in the music, completely unaware of the danger. After a moment of hesitation, Virginia raised the hammer and struck her mother's head with force. Blood began to flow from the wound, but Lois calmly turned her gaze to her daughter and asked what she was doing. Without responding, Virginia grabbed the knife and began to frantically stab her mother in the neck and chest. Within a few minutes, the brutal assault was over. Virginia dropped the blood-stained knife onto the floor, knelt down, and took her mother's still warm hand in hers. She sat silently for about half an hour before calmly going to the shower to wash off the blood and change into clean clothes. The following day, Virginia stayed in the house with her parents' bodies, trying to figure out how to dispose of them. She considered various options, but realized that it would be impossible to secretly remove the bodies and bury them. For one, the neighbors might notice something odd. And secondly, she simply didn't have the strength to move two bodies out of the house and dig graves. In the end, Virginia came up with a grim solution. She decided to wall her parents up inside their own home. However, carrying out this plan would require significant effort. First, she went to a sporting goods store and bought 2 sleeping bags, which she intended to use as makeshift coffins. Then she headed to a hardware store where she bought dozens of rolls of plastic sheeting, a mix for making cement, expanding foam, and cinder blocks, which were delivered directly to her home. When the neighbors asked, Virginia explained that her father was planning a small renovation project, and they didn't press further. Struggling with the weight of the bodies, Virginia packed her parents into the sleeping bags and then wrapped them in layer after layer of plastic sheeting and tape, trying to make them as airtight as possible. She then dragged her father's remains to his office, placing them in a corner behind his desk. She prepared the cement mixture according to the instructions and began building a makeshift sarcophagus around the body. She poured the cement generously over the remains, filling in any gaps with expanding foam. Virginia decided to leave her mother's body in the room where the violent incident had occurred. She shoved the sleeping bag into the closet along with the blood-stained blanket and other bedding, then covered everything in expanding foam. After that, she wrapped the closet in 20 rolls of plastic sheeting. To finish, she built a wall from the remaining cinder blocks, sealing off the corner where the closet with her mother's remains stood. On the same day, Virginia ordered 2 new credit cards from the bank in the names of her now-deceased parents and began to relieve stress by making online purchases. She also sent several messages to her siblings, pretending to be her mother, telling them that she and her father had decided to get away for a while and were going to the seaside to relax and improve their health. Her older siblings, who rarely visited, didn't question her and simply wished their parents a nice time away. The pandemic as a cover. For the next 6 months, Virginia went about her usual routine, acting as if nothing had happened. She went grocery shopping, interacted with the neighbors, collected her parents' pensions, and occasionally sent messages to relatives on behalf of her mother, trying to lull them into a false sense of security. She even made appointments for her parents with their family doctor, but canceled them with various excuses. If anyone asked about her parents, John and Lois, and why they hadn't been seen in a while, she explained that they were staying with one of their many children. In the spring of 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic swept across the world, and a global lockdown was declared. Everyone was stuck at home, which for Virginia seemed like a stroke of luck. She no longer had to come up with reasons for why her parents weren't seen outside. And with the lockdown in place, no one would be visiting them anytime soon. At the same time, Virginia occasionally called the family doctor pretending to be her mother, asking for advice. But whenever he suggested they come in for an appointment or offered to visit them, she would come up with excuses. She sent messages to her siblings from Lois's phone, asking about their lives and the grandchildren, but never invited them over. If any of them mentioned planning a visit, she would discourage them. She even called the police pretending to be her mother and complained about noisy neighbors or troublemakers. Over time, Virginia's behavior became increasingly odd. She started pushing herself on people she barely knew, offering them friendship, inventing strange stories about her personal life, saying she was about to get married and leave town. She bothered delivery drivers with all sorts of questions and frequently called the police for trivial reasons. In the small town, people started to think of her as the local eccentric, harmless, but a little off. The truth was, she was desperately trying to draw attention to herself and likely, subconsciously hoping that her parents' bodies would finally be discovered. For over 4 years, Virginia McCullough successfully managed to conceal the deaths of her parents. Even her own siblings never suspected that their mother and father had been gone for so long, believing the messages and greeting cards they received were truly from them, when in fact, it was Virginia sending them. The only person who suspected something was wrong was the family doctor. The doctor became concerned when the McCulloughs, who had always been vigilant about their health, failed to make appointments for routine checkups, lab tests, and adjustments to their ongoing treatments. Virginia was the one to pick up their prescriptions, assuring the doctor that everything was fine with her parents. Lois had repeatedly scheduled appointments, but each time, Virginia canceled, citing various excuses. On several occasions, the doctor personally visited the McCullough home, hoping to check on their health. But he was always met by Virginia, who claimed that her parents were out visiting relatives. In the end, in August 2023, the doctor contacted the police to report his suspicions and asked them to investigate. On September 1st, 2023, the police called the McCullough home and asked Virginia to have her parents come to the door. She became visibly anxious and tried to convince them that her parents had gone on vacation and decided not to bring their phones so no one would disturb them. She insisted that her mom and dad would return in a couple of weeks. But when a month passed without any word, the authorities began an investigation and obtained a search warrant. When the police finally forced their way into the house and Virginia was formally charged in connection with the deaths of her parents, she calmly told them she had something to show them. She led the officers to her father's office and pointed to a makeshift tomb by the wall, then moved to her mother's room, silently nodding toward the sealed closet. The bodies of the Michellos were recovered that same day. Due to the advanced decomposition, it was difficult to determine the exact cause of death. However, the daughter, now charged with the crime, fully confessed and voluntarily described in detail how she had ended her parents' lives. When asked why she did it, Virginia blamed old childhood resentments, accused John and Lois of cruelty, and portrayed them as true monsters. When the tragic events at the McCullough household came to light, the residents of the small town of Great Bedeau were shocked. Perhaps no one was more shocked than the older siblings of the deceased couple, who had long believed their parents were alive and being cared for by their younger sister. It was precisely this distant family dynamic that allowed Virginia to hide her crime for so many years. On October 11, 2024, Virginia was found guilty of the intentional double murder. Investigators concluded that her actions were not motivated by childhood trauma or abuse, as she had claimed, but rather by financial gain. For years, Virginia had been living off her parents' pension while racking up significant debts in their names. She received a life sentence, with the possibility of parole after 35 years. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into cold case investigations. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video, and remember, the search for truth never stops.